You already know more than you think. You just don't know how to read the signs yet, because every person leaves clues. And Nietzsche's 18 Truths will teach you how to find them and what they mean. This is the skill no one teaches you yet. Once it's unlocked, there's no going back. You start to notice things you never did before. A glance that lingers too long, a forced laugh, a subtle change in tone suddenly. The invisible becomes obvious. But be warned, this video isn't just a list of tips or surface-level advice you can skim through. It's a full breakdown, divided into 3 powerful parts, each one carefully layered upon the last like steps in a hidden staircase. Miss one, and you'll miss the structure, the depth, the truth. So stay with me, because by the end of all 3 parts, you won't just understand others. You'll understand yourself in ways you never expected. From the earliest moments of your life, you were conditioned to trust what people say. After all, words are the currency of human interaction. But Nietzsche urged us to look deeper. 8. Warned us not to be seduced by language, because words rarely speak from the place we think they do. People speak from instinct, from fear, from ego, from whatever helped them survive their past. The face someone shows the world isn't their truth, it's their shield. That person who showers everyone with kindness. It might not be kindness at all, it might be fear dressed in politeness. The deep dread of rejection covered by a smile. And the one who seems stoic, untouchable, always composed, they might be quietly unraveling, hoping no one sees past the act. What's most deceptive and tragic is that many people don't even realize they're performing. They're not just hiding from the world, they're hiding from themselves. They've learned to play roles in a script they never chose. Every smile, every opinion, every tone is shaped by an invisible rule book. This kept me safe once, so I'll keep doing it. And so, like masked performers on an endless stage, they become strangers even to their own hearts. Nietzsche once said, "Every profound spirit needs a mask." But this wasn't a judgment. It was a caution. A reminder that the mask is never the person. And here's what no one tells you: people leak the truth constantly, but not in their words, in the tiny fractures between them. The way their eyes dart when the topic cuts too close, the nervous laughter that doesn't match the moment, the sudden urge to change the subject when something real surfaces. Aren't accidents, they're openings. Nietzsche's first psychological truth is this: everyone wears a mask to survive, not because they're fake, but because they're afraid. Society demands acceptance, and to get it, people shape themselves into something digestible. But no mask is perfect. It slips. And when it does, what leaks out isn't weakness, it's truth. The first sign is always tension. Watch for discomfort. That's where the real person begins to surface. Second, what someone hates in others often reveals what they're denying in themselves. One of Nietzsche's most piercing insights is the idea of projection. When someone obsessively mocks arrogance, it might not be virtue, it might be insecurity about their own value. When someone endlessly calls out dishonesty in others, they may be hiding a truth they haven't admitted. We reject in others what we fear in ourselves. So, if you really want to read someone, don't just focus on who they admire. Pay close attention to who and what they criticize, and ask yourself why. Third, silence speaks louder than words. Nietzsche didn't believe that truth always came through speech. Sometimes it's in what's not said, the heavy pause, the swallowed sentence, the things that hang in the air and never get spoken. Real emotion often lives between the lines, because ... In fact, he saw language as a tool of the herd, often used not to reveal truth, but to escape it. In Nietzsche's eyes, words are frequently masks worn by the masses, convenient tools to avoid the discomfort of raw honesty. Think about it. When someone hesitates before answering a simple question, when they subtly steer the conversation away from something personal, or when their replies feel rehearsed and shallow, that silence becomes louder than any spoken sentence. Those brief pauses, those calculated dodges, what are they if not silent screams of fear? A person avoiding vulnerability is, paradoxically, showing you the deepest truths about what they fear the most. For excessive virtue is often disguised vanity. Be cautious around those who constantly signal their righteousness, the ones who always correct others, who seem to be on a moral podium, preaching at every opportunity. Nietzsche described this behavior as the will to power, cleverly veiled under the cloak of virtue. Morality in such cases becomes less about values and more about control over perception, over status, over others. And the louder the performance of virtue, the more likely it's hiding something darker beneath. Because genuine goodness doesn't shout, it simply exists. It doesn't seek applause. It doesn't require validation. 5. People don't lie to you first. They lie to themselves. This insight shifts everything. Think about the familiar phrases. I'm fine. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. These aren't always attempts to deceive others. More often they're declarations people have repeated so many times they've convinced themselves they're true. Nietzsche didn't view self-deception as malicious. It's not an attack. It's a shield. A fragile defense against a painful or chaotic world. So when someone's narrative seems off, when their words don't match their tone or body language, don't rush to judge them as dishonest. Recognize that the real deception may have begun long before you arrived. And that's exactly what makes reading people possible, because those internal contradictions eventually surface. And the truth is written in the gaps. 6. Where someone feels superior, they're often hiding inferiority. This is Nietzsche at his clearest. Superiority, he believed, is often just insecurity in disguise. When someone constantly lists their achievements, demands recognition, or reminds everyone of their worth, it's often not confidence speaking. It's fear of insignificance. When a person casually belittles others, it might not be cruelty, it might be desperation. Real confidence doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't compete. It simply is. And that's the paradox. The louder the claim of dominance, the more fragile the ego beneath it. So look closer behind that throne of pride. You may find a frightened child, clinging to a crown that barely fits. Reading people isn't about labeling them. It's about understanding their emotional architecture. When someone interrupts repeatedly, it may not be arrogance. It could be a panic-driven fear of being ignored. When someone floods social media with curated happiness, it might not be joy. It could be a silent plea for someone to notice their pain. And when someone says, I'm fine, while looking away or fidgeting, listen with your eyes, not your ears. The body doesn't lie, even when the mouth does. These truths aren't tools for manipulation. They're invitations to empathy. Because the clearer you see someone, the harder it is to hate them. That's Nietzsche's secret. He didn't want you to see through others so you could control them. He wanted you to see through them so you could stop being fooled and start genuinely connecting. And if you've ever looked at someone and felt like you were only seeing the surface, if you've ever wished you could decode what was happening behind the mask, drop a comment below. Let's talk about the moments when people showed you the truth without saying a word. And if this video helped you see people differently, subscribe. There's much more coming. And you'll want to see the rest of Nietzsche's truths unfold. Because it's one thing to notice the mask people wear, but it's another thing entirely to witness it crack right in front of you. And if you've ever truly paid attention, really watched someone beyond their words, you've probably seen it happen. A fleeting look of discomfort when their beliefs are questioned. A sudden shift in their tone when a topic hits too close to home. That awkward, nervous laugh that feels out of place, like a smokescreen for something deeper. These moments aren't random. They're not accidents. They are clues, little leaks of truth that slip out when the persona can no longer hold. If you know how to recognize them, you'll begin to understand that people aren't actually difficult to read. They're just terrified of being seen. In part 1, we explored how people construct masks to survive. But here in part 2, we descend into the subtle fractures, the places where those carefully built personas start to break apart. Because Nietzsche believed something radical. The self isn't stable. It's not a fixed identity. It's a performance, a role we assemble piece by piece to make it through the world. But the moment that performance is threatened, when control slips, the real self begins to leak through the seams. And what drives that breakdown more than anything? Fear. Let's start right here. Because fear is far more universal than most of us admit. 7. Most actions are driven by unconscious fear. Ask yourself, why does someone ramble or over-explain in conversations? Why do they dominate a room or on the opposite end, shrink away and vanish? Why do they nod in agreement when everything in their body says no? The answer is often fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of failure, of humiliation, of not being enough. Nietzsche understood that most people don't act from pure intention or desire. They act from a desire to avoid loss. Loss of control, loss of love, loss of worth. So the next time you want to truly read someone, don't just ask what they want. Instead ask, what are they afraid of losing? That's where the real story lives. That's where the truth begins. 8. Criticism is a mirror. Now, listen closely. The next time someone constantly critiques others, the person who mocks emotional vulnerability, could it be that they're terrified of feeling their own emotions? The woman who scorns others for their appearance, might she be silently battling with her own reflection?
Ow.
Nietzsche saw judgment, not as a revelation about others, but as a window into the self. Most criticism, he argued, is projection. It's not about the person being judged. It's about the part of the self the critic refuses to accept. So when you hear repeated complaints, don't be distracted by who they're aimed at. Trace them backward to the speaker, because projection isn't just a shield, it's a confession. And if you learn how to listen with this in mind, it will point you straight to the hidden pain someone is trying to bury. 9. Guilt hides behind false confidence. There's a type of person you've likely met. They seem unshakably confident, always poised, always in control, seemingly immune to doubt. But look closer. Notice the clenched jaw when things go off script. The over-preparation before even small tasks. The flare of defensiveness when they're challenged. That's not real confidence, it's armor. Nietzsche observed this especially in leaders, in teachers, even in preachers, people who seem certain of everything, but only because they're terrified of being exposed. What are they? Hiding. Often it's guilt, something unresolved, choice they regret, truth they're afraid to face. They don't want to be discovered, so they cover themselves in certainty like a costume. Because when someone performs control too perfectly, it's often because deep down they feel completely out of control. Nietzsche understood this, and it's why his truths continue to hit so hard. When you stop taking people at face value, when you begin to see what's under the surface, you realize almost every action, every word, every silence is revealing something. And that's exactly why there's much more coming, and you'll want to see the rest of Nietzsche's truths unfold. Because it's one thing to notice the mask, but watching it crack. That's when the real understanding begins. Maybe it's a version of themselves they're trying to prove wrong. Real peace doesn't perform, doesn't need a stage, a spotlight, or an audience. True peace is quiet, steady, and still. So when someone seems too confident, so sure, so flawless, don't be intimidated. Be curious. Ask yourself, what are they trying to cover up? Because here's a psychological truth Nietzsche understood deeply. Exaggeration reveals the hidden truth. This one is subtle, but once you recognize it, it becomes impossible to ignore. 10. People betray themselves through exaggeration. Someone who repeatedly says, I don't care what anyone thinks, likely cares more than they'd ever admit. The person who insists they're always happy, they may be struggling with sadness they haven't named. Exaggeration is like emotional camouflage. It draws attention away from the fear that lies underneath. The louder the claim, it's the more you should question what's being drowned out beneath it. According to Nietzsche, extremism, whether in pride, emotion, or belief, is not a sign of strength, but of internal imbalance. So when someone speaks in absolutes, don't just listen to the words. Feel the insecurity hidden between the lines. Because exaggeration isn't about clarity, it's about covering up doubt. It's the ego, cranking up the volume in hopes of silencing something it can't face. So ask yourself, what silence is that volume trying to fill? The desire for control masks inner chaos. We all seek control to some degree in our homes, our work, our relationships. It gives us a sense of safety in a chaotic world. But when the need for control becomes obsessive, there's something deeper going on. 11. Those who seek control often fear inner chaos. Nietzsche saw it with brutal clarity. When someone can't let go, when they micromanage every task, resist. Any change or dominate others, it's not a display of power, it's a sign of panic. An inner world spinning just fast enough to make them afraid that if they loosen their grip, everything will collapse. Think of the person who insists on perfection in every detail. It might look like discipline on the surface. It's driven by a hidden fear that without control, the self will unravel. And the stricter the outer world is managed, the more fragile the inner self tends to be. Because the truth is, people don't cling to control unless they're afraid of what will surface when they let go. Performance as a signal, emptiness in disguise. This is one of Nietzsche's most haunting insights, and perhaps even more relevant in the modern world, especially in the era of constant broadcasting and social media. 12. The louder the performance, the emptier the core. Scroll through any platform today, and you'll see it. Endless highlight reels, perfect poses, carefully curated lives. But Nietzsche didn't see this as confidence. He saw it as desperation. A loud, persistent cry for validation disguised as entertainment. Because when someone is constantly performing always on, always showcasing, it's not because they feel whole. It's because they fear that if they stop performing, no one will notice them at all. So they create noise, drama, spectacle, not out of arrogance, but out of quiet need. And yet the person who is truly grounded doesn't need applause. They don't need to be watched. They already feel seen by themselves. So when someone's life looks like a constant performance, remember this. It's not a display of power. It's a whisper of need. Putting it together, you're probably starting to feel it, now that subtle shift in awareness. You walk into a room, and suddenly, it's not just what people say that grabs your attention. It's how they say it. You notice the rhythms, the interruptions, the overstatements. You hear someone dominating a conversation and recognize their fear of being invisible. You hear someone boast endlessly, and instead of being impressed, you sense the wound behind the words. You're not reading minds. You're reading the mask. And Nietzsche gave you the flashlight. This is more than just a technique. It's a responsibility. Because once you start seeing people clearly, truly seeing them, you can't unsee it. You realize that behind the polished smiles, the curated lives, the perfect answers, most people are quietly suffering. And reading them, it's not about gaining power, it's about gaining compassion. It's about offering grace. Real grace isn't about turning a blind eye. It's about truly seeing someone, seeing the child behind the critic, the fear behind the bully, the guilt behind the arrogance. And when you begin to look through that lens, something remarkable happens. You don't become weaker. You become unshakable. Why? Because understanding disarms anger. Compassion doesn't make you vulnerable, it makes you wise. Want more? If this part of the journey opened your eyes, just wait until the final chapter. Because in part 3, we're about to strip away the final layer that conceals the human soul. What happens when the mask is completely gone? In this last segment, we'll explore how the deepest wounds from childhood continue to echo through adult behavior. You'll start noticing how a person's silence, their bursts of envy, or their obsession with being remembered aren't random quirks, they're stories. They're emotional fingerprints left by pain. And as these patterns become clearer, you won't just learn 6 more truths that let you see people. You'll gain the rarest skill of understanding yourself at the same depth. By now, something in you has shifted. You don't just see people anymore. You read them, not as villains, not as heroes, not even as broken, but as human beings just like you doing their best to survive with masks they never consciously chose. But we're not done yet, because here's something even deeper. Behind every behavior is a belief, and behind every belief is a wound. And that's what this final part is truly about, learning to recognize the soul. The story underneath the surface, the quiet suffering behind the loud performance. Nietzsche didn't just call out patterns. He showed us the emotional origins of those patterns, turned insight into empathy. Let's finish what we started. 13. No one speaks from pure logic. They speak from pain. You might assume people are rational, that they debate facts, make decisions based on careful thought. But Nietzsche believed otherwise. Beneath nearly every logical argument, there's a scar, a wound, fear they've never fully named. When someone says, "I don't believe in love, it's just a fantasy," they're not just sharing a viewpoint. They're building a wall. Not to trap you out, but to protect themselves. The statement isn't rooted in true, it's rooted in hurt. That's the key. Most people form beliefs after they've been wounded. Then they back them up with logic. So if you really want to understand where someone's coming from, don't just ask, what do they believe? Ask, what broke them? What pain are they trying to avoid? What experience are they still protecting themselves from? This understanding changes everything. You stop hearing opinions as attacks. You start hearing them as shields, defenses, survival strategies. And when that clicks, you no longer feel the need to argue. You begin to listen, not to win, but to understand. 14. How someone reacts to weakness reveals their power. If you want to see someone's true character, don't look at how they treat those in power. Watch how they treat those who are powerless, those who can't fight back, who can't offer anything in return. Nietzsche believed that real strength doesn't show up in domination. It shows up in restraint. Think about it. When someone mocks vulnerability, it's not because they're fearless. It's because they're afraid of their own. When a person punishes others for mistakes, it's often because they were once punished without mercy. When someone always has to win but leaves a trail of pain behind, it usually means they're still fighting an old war, one that lives inside them. But the person who can witness weakness and not exploit it, who can sit in the presence of sadness without rushing to fix it or run away, who can forgive even when they had every right to punish, that's someone who's no longer ruled by the ghosts of their past. That's real power, quiet, steady, compassionate. And as we move forward into the final truths, keep this in mind. What you're learning isn't just how to read others. You're learning how to hold them with understanding, not judgment. That's where connection begins. Let me know when you're ready for the S. Continuation of part 3, and we'll uncover the next layers together. They don't need to prove anything because they've already won the inner war. There's a quiet strength in someone who no longer performs for approval. So if you really want to understand a person, truly read them. Don't listen to their words first. Instead, give them a moment where compassion is an option, a moment where they could choose empathy or ego. What they do in that space will reveal who they truly are, not just the version they pretend to be. 15. When someone fears being forgotten, they chase attention. Have you ever met someone who always needs to be noticed? Every room they walk into feels a little louder. Every story they tell is just a bit too exaggerated. Every gesture, every outfit, every post they scream, "Notice me." At first, it looks like confidence, even charm. But Nietzsche saw through this illusion. He believed that the hunger for attention is rarely about arrogance. It's often rooted in something much deeper, a fear of invisibility, a dread of being erased, the aching belief that if no one sees you, you don't exist, that you could live and die, without leaving a single mark. So people create noise, not because they love it, but because they can't bear the silence. The child who is ignored doesn't always grow up quiet. Sometimes they grow up loud. They overcompensate, turning their fear into performance. And instead of asking for love directly, because they were once denied it, they demand it in disguised forms. Drama, chaos, applause. So the next time someone feels like too much, stop and ask, what are they afraid will happen if they're not enough? Because sometimes the show isn't vanity. It's a cry for connection. 16. The person they attack is often the person they envy. This is one of Nietzsche's boldest and most unsettling truths. People don't always attack because they hate. Often they attack because they admire. They believe they never could become what they admire. Think about it. Isn't it easier to tear something down than to admit we want it? Criticism, gossip, mockery, these become shields. It hurts less to insult someone than to admit you wish you were more like them. The person who mocks someone's confidence, who rolls their eyes at another's success, who resents someone's freedom, they're not just being cruel. They're revealing their pain, because to see someone embody a part of yourself you've buried, that's confronting. It reminds you of the parts of you that were silenced, shamed, or left behind. So rather than celebrate others, we destroy them. But behind that destruction, desire, a soul whispering, I want that too, but I'm not allowed, if you can. Recognize this in others. You become immune to petty hate. If you can recognize it in yourself, you become free. 17. People act out their childhood, not their beliefs. You've probably heard it said, people don't change. But Nietzsche would argue something different. People repeat. They replay old scripts. They wear old roles, carry the fears and burdens handed to them long ago. It's not because they want to, but because they've never known another way. A child who was never heard becomes an adult who never listens. A child punished for expressing feelings becomes an adult who distrusts emotions. A child taught that love must be earned becomes someone who performs endlessly, even in toxic situations, hoping one day they'll finally be enough. These people may think they're living by beliefs, but really, they're reenacting the past. And they don't even know it. So if you want to read someone deeply, don't just look at who they are today. Ask, who did they have to be back then to feel safe? Behavior is just biography in disguise. Behind every adult is a child still waiting to feel safe enough to stop pretending. 18. Their patterns are a confession, if you know how. To listen, this final truth has the power to change everything. People don't always have the language to explain what hurts, but they will tell you, over and over again. Not with words, but with patterns. The friend who always withdraws when things get real. The partner who sabotages joy. The coworker who overreacts to criticism. These aren't random behaviors, they're confessions. Echoes of pain still unresolved. People may not know how to say, I was hurt here. They'll show you where the wound is again and again until someone notices. Till someone sees the pattern not as a flaw, but as a cry. And that's when real understanding begins. Because they've already won the inner war. So if you want to read someone, give them a moment where compassion is an option. What they do in that moment will show you who they are, not just who they pretend to be. A person who ghosts when things get close. A person who always vanishes just as intimacy starts to form. A person who overworks not out of ambition but to avoid stillness, the kind of silence where truth begins to speak. A person who flirts with everyone but connects with no one, leaving behind a trail of shallow sparks, but no lasting fire. These aren't just quirks or surface-level habits. They're confessions. They are unspoken declarations. This is how I protect myself. This is where I was hurt. This is the wound I never want to feel again. Nietzsche believed that if you learn to listen not just with your ears, but with your eyes, your attention, your empathy, then patterns become a kind of language. And in that language, truth reveals itself long before words ever do. And when you begin to understand this, something powerful shifts inside you. You stop personalizing other people's pain. Stop taking their distance, their defenses, their deflections as insults. You stop reacting and start understanding. You become something rare. You become a mirror, not a weapon. You reflect. Rather than retaliate, you become the person who sees brokenness and still chooses grace. And that, more than any clever insight or tactic, is where your real strength lies. Because in that moment, you're not just reading people anymore. You're remembering yourself. So pause here. Let this settle. Every truth we've explored wasn't just about other people's behavior. It was also about you. Your own defense mechanisms. Your own hidden wounds. Your own childhood scripts playing out in adult form. Because the clearer you learn to see others, the clearer you begin to see yourself. This isn't the end of the journey. It's the beginning of a new way of seeing a deeper, more compassionate kind of vision. Nietzsche never intended for us to simply become observers. He wanted us to awaken. To realize that everything we judge in others is something we still carry within ourselves. That what we criticize may reflect what we fear, and what we admire often mirrors what we long to embody. So if this video made you feel seen, if you found yourself recognizing patterns in the people around you, perhaps even within yourself, don't keep it to yourself. Leave a comment below. Which of these 18 truths spoke to you the loudest? Which one hit the hardest? Let's create something raw and honest together, a space where the masks can finally come off. And if this message stirred something in you, subscribe, because this is just the beginning of learning to see what's hidden and becoming who you were always meant to be.